afternoon and welcome down to a wonderful and windy Betty's Bay. We are starting off down here in the intertidal zone with an African penguin heading over to mermaid pools. My name is Jax, I'm going to be your naturalist down here. We have Flippy behind the camera, so excited to have him back with us. And we have a really exciting show planned for you today. So let's go have a look at that penguin because we love to watch them in this zone. This is exactly where we had that penguin yesterday. And you can see that it is wild down here. The wind has made the sea very choppy. We're going to have quite a lot of sea spray on our show today, so we might have to wipe the lens a couple of times. Some very dramatic scenes with the penguin on the rocks and the swell behind us. We are a live show, so please send us in your comments and questions on YouTube, on our website, or using the hashtag WildEarth on Twitter. Let's go have a look at the official weather forecast and then let's get stuck in. We've had a million different plans to start the show, and every time we think we're going to do this or we're going to do that, something else pops up, and that's the fun of a live show, really. I am a planner, but the best things in life are not planned. So we're going to be watching this African penguin. He's heading over towards mermaid pools. Penguins come back in from the seashore, or from the ocean rather. Oh, he's going to... a bit of a tricky jump there. So this penguin is walking on rocks that most humans would struggle.
With a slew of potential dangers lurking, it's essential to be aware of your surroundings whilst walking in the wilderness.
20 yards away from one of the most endangered species. This is a big bull.
What a moment, what a close encounter with an Ellie bull. He's just over here now. He's moved completely away.
Being on a bushwalk and seeing a leopard, I mean, it's ridiculous to be this close to a leopard on foot and for him not to run is absolutely insane. How crazy was that?
Through the gap there is just the back of the head of a male lion. He is absolutely unaware that we are here right now. I'll tell you, seeing lions on foot, it definitely brings out the caveman in you, this little scared human being.
So usually we end off our Rocky Shore shows with a penguin or two. But today we're starting our show with a penguin, and we have another little creature below us that we are watching very intently. So we really would love to have it on the show, but we don't want it to move away before we get to show it to you. So Rocky Shores can be a bit tricky to watch when the wind is blowing, because it ripples the water out and we've got a lot of sea spray coming in. I love how this penguin has gone up the ridge and just made dead sure that there's nothing scary waiting on the other side, no predators. See if he's going to take the jump. Oh no, looks like he's going to settle. This penguin wants some alone time, clearly, sitting away from all the other birds. So I think what we might do is we might have a move on to the second animal of the day. So we are on the anemones, it seems. The baby sea anemones actually do have a name, so they have different forms. And I was listening to the name, and now I've completely forgotten it. I was listening to it on the way here, actually. So they have two forms. So what will happen is with sea anemones, you can get two different types. So you get some sea anemones that will be born from inside the parent. So they will brood inside the parent, and then they will exit the parent and find a place to settle.
The Safari Guide of the Year 2022 is approaching us rapidly. This year, we'll be heading to Bushwise Field Guides at the Southern African Wildlife College from the 27th June till the 2nd of July. We will soon meet all our contestants who are vying for the prize of being the very best of the best, and the judges who will put them through their paces. Join me, Steve Falconbridge, as we dream it, guide it, win it.
If you would like to be a part of the team that shares the wildebeest migration in Kenya live on WildEarth, then we have some great news for you. There are a few places left to join our expeditions in August and September this year. You'll be staying in an exclusive tented camp with ensuite bedrooms nestled in the riverine woodlands of the Talek River. Head over to our website to book your bucket list experience today. WildEarth Expeditions. Travel with purpose.
So we are looking at our second animal of the day, which is a shore crab that we were hoping to start the show with, and then the penguin had other plans for us. And it's very strange to see a crab standing on the shoreline like this, completely relaxed and not scared of any predators. So we're just going to watch this crab for a little while. He doesn't seem to want to move very much, and moving is what can alert predators to your presence. And this crab is a crustacean, so like the barnacles that we were watching yesterday, like lobsters and whale food, all fall into the crustacean family. So they've got a hard shell. This crab will have some nice soft inner bits. And a lot of the crabs on the seashore actually eat the algae. So you do get crabs in tropical areas called ghost crabs, and they'll eat a lot of your little animals like sea turtles, the turtle hatchlings. The shore crabs will eat stranded kelp. Exciting to have this crab, and the fact that he's sticking is really cool. I've also just remembered that the larvae of an anemone is called a planula. So it was somewhere in my head, and it is funny how your head can store a lot of information. Gracie also had a question yesterday about oysters and pearls, and I'll answer that a bit later on. So I was on the right vein. My brain just couldn't access the information at the time. So this crab would be great food for many different animals on the seashore. So otters really like crabs, although they would eat slightly bigger crabs. Your seabirds, I think a little egret might even try and enjoy a crab like this one. Gulls will certainly try to eat them. But you can see he's camouflaged really well against the rocks and against the encrusting algae. And it's very strange to me, a lot of these crabs also feed nocturnally, so they'll feed at night, a little bit less visible. Moonbeam Smith, happy birthday. So if it's the 17th anniversary of your 50th birthday, you're going to make me do maths and I'm going to come out second. So 50 plus 17 would make you 67, which is not a bad age at all. It's going into the golden years. So happy birthday. Thank you for spending your show with us, or spending the show with us and spending your birthday with us. I love birthdays. I think they're super important. I can't give you a gift or light a candle for you, but Moonbeam Smith, you sent me down a rabbit hole yesterday with that crowned shepherd story, because in South Africa it's actually not really a popular thing. So we'll also talk about that a little bit later on. But I found such cool information on them because we don't have, so it's a fossilized urchin, which is apparently very common in Europe and in England specifically. So moonbeam swifts, so crabs would go through, especially when they're growing, they would sort of, I wouldn't say shed, but in a sense they would shed their shells as they grow a little bit bigger. These crabs wouldn't get much bigger than what you're seeing there. So they are not a very big species, but then you get species, is it the spider crab, Flippy, that massive one at the aquarium? You get the spider crabs that are, I think they weigh a couple of kilograms. They're absolutely huge and they live in the deep ocean. So with crabs, I think it all depends on the environment they're in. If it's if you're looking at the ocean, at the bottom of the ocean, some animals are absolutely massive, like the spider crabs. And if you look at this environment here, in the water, I think it would be better to be larger. But I think the size of this crab is absolutely perfect to sneak in between the crevices to avoid being eaten. So it's so cool to start the show with this crab. I think what we might do is we might actually head on over and have a look at the anemones, because we had a million anemone questions yesterday. Ooh, wait, what is the crab doing now? Is he going after that snail? Flippy? Looks like he might be. I've been trying to stay away from the crab so that it doesn't get scared of me, but it doesn't seem to be all that worried. So I think he might be resting. He doesn't look like he's really actively looking for any food. We might move along to our anemones, because we're actually going to look at the anatomy of the anemones and answer some of those unanswered questions that we had yesterday. So we've got a couple of anemones in the pool next to the crab. And these are sandy anemones that we have in the pool here. And Kenneth asked us yesterday, are anemones male or female, or can they be male or female? And the answer is that anemones can be both. So either anemone can be both male and female, or the anemone could be a single gender, but then they would transition. So if they're a single gender, then they would transition from male to female later in life. But many anemones are both male and female. They're hermaphrodites. And anemones are absolutely incredible. So they can reproduce sexually, so they can release eggs and they can release sperm. But they can also reproduce asexually. So what anemones can do is they can bud off, so parts of themselves can bud off and create new anemones. There's something called pedal laceration, which I thought was really cool. So we'll look at the anatomy of an anemone in just a moment. I'm really getting my tongue twisted over these words today. And so that's sort of the bottom of the anemone where it attaches to the rocks below. And that can also just break off and form a completely new anemone. They also have what you call fission, so they can almost split themselves. And so anemones have a varied way in which they can reproduce. But to answer the question, they can be both male and female hermaphrodites, and then they can also start off as a male and transition to being a female anemone later on in life. The other question that we had was if anemones have hearts, and they don't. So they fall into the Cnidaria family. might do is we might actually have a look at the book, and Flippy's just going to have to tell me the best way to hold it. And we're going to look at the anatomy of the anemone. So this is quite a simple book, so I've just added in a couple of things. So anemones don't have a heart, but they do have a very basic nervous system. So if you have a look, this is the top of the anemone. This is the part that we get to see. And then you can see it has a mouth. And then they have quite a long throat section. And at the bottom, they don't call that the stomach, and I think that's because they don't really have a digestive system per se, but it's called the gastrovascular cavity, and so that's where all the food is going to be sort of sent to and processed. Once they've processed the food, the waste is going to be excreted out of exactly the same channel it came into. So they've only got one hole for everything to go in and out, which includes the eggs and the sperm, and in some anemones like the plum anemone, the baby anemones. And then they have their gonads, which is their sexual organs, to the side of their stomach. So you can see they are super basic. They can eat, they can reproduce, and they also have this pedal disc, which is the bit at the bottom, and that will cement them. So they've got a substance that they'll secrete that will cement them to wherever they would like to stay. So anemones can move, and you get some anemones that prefer to live a nomadic life, so they don't always stick in one place. What's very cool is that although these anemones don't have a heart, some anemones have a pulse. And scientists are actually trying to look at that because they know anemones can regenerate, and they can figure out that they've got this pulse that runs through the body, that pushes water through the body. And so what they're hoping is that they can use the structure of the anemone to discover how to regenerate human heart tissue, which I thought was super interesting. So they've got a very basic body with specialized cells, but no real organ systems. And they are called polyps. So when they are young, they'll establish themselves as a little polyp on the rock. And then they will grow up to be the beautiful anemones that we get to show you in the seashore today. Lisa, no. So each sea urchins are actually a little bit different. So they are echinoderms. So they don't fall into the same family. So they're kind of upside down if you compare them to the anemone. So the anemone has its, I don't want to say its face because that's very biologically incorrect, but you can see it's kind of facing upwards, and the food is coming in from the top. Anemones, urchins are very different because what urchins do is they actually graze on the bottom. So when you look at an urchin, you see all the spiky bits at the top, and you think that might be to actually spear food, but those spiky bits are just to protect the urchin. And I'm actually going to show you a photo of an urchin, because this is the urchin that was related to the shepherd's crown. So we're just going to go back to the book for a second, back to Moonbeam Smith's question. So echinoderms and sea anemones, and sea anemones would be cnidarians, are in two separate families. So they're not really related, although you will find them in similar places along the seashore. And where anemones will often eat meat, so they like your snails and things, your urchins are actually just grazers. They live off the kelp, they live off the stranded kelp. They eat the baby kelp plants before they settle. And we have shown you Cape urchins on the show before. But what I want to show you is the urchin that when fossilized is known as the crowned shepherd. It's also known as a thunderstone.
The Safari Guide of the Year 2022 is approaching us rapidly. This year, we'll be heading to Bushwise Field Guides at the Southern African Wildlife College from the 27th June till the 2nd of July. We will soon meet all our contestants who are vying for the prize of being the very best of the best, and the judges who will put them through their paces. Join me, Steve Falconbridge, as we dream it, guide it, win it.
If you would like to be a part of the team that shares the wildebeest migration in Kenya live on WildEarth, then we have some great news for you. There are a few places left to join our expeditions in August and September this year. You'll be staying in an exclusive tented camp with ensuite bedrooms nestled in the riverine woodlands of the Talek River. Head over to our website to book your bucket list experience today. WildEarth Expeditions. Travel with purpose.
So I think what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the book because I want to show you what would, if fossilized, become a fairy loaf or a thunderstone or a shepherd's crown. So these are in South Africa what we call pansy shells, and the pansy shell urchins right at the bottom. And moonbeam smith, it's actually not common in South Africa at all. So off the coast of England it's very common, but in South Africa pansy shells do wash up. But the only fossilized records I could find would be the Mzamba fossils and the fossils of Trafalgar off the south coast of KwaZulu-Natal, where I actually grew up and spent my childhood years beachcombing. But they don't just wash up, and it's certainly not something you keep in homes or see as a luck symbol in Africa. So this is a type of urchin that we have here, and you can see these are tropical urchins. So these are the scary looking ones with the spikes. But urchin mouths are below, and so they will move along the rocks and graze on what they find. And it sounds like you guys are having a good time, so I'm glad that you're enjoying this. So we've moved on from the anemones to the urchins. And in the Cape, we actually don't get that many types of urchins, and the pansy shells don't really wash up here in huge numbers. If you go further up the east coast, you'll see more. But what I found very interesting is that 4,000 years ago, they would actually bury people with fossilized urchin shells. It was seen, or fossils of urchins rather. And so there's a lot of mythology, but nothing that I could find in Africa. So I'm going to turn the book around. It's so windy, my pages are going to flap, but I do want to see if I can actually show you the urchins that we do get here, the Cape urchins. And you would have noticed that I'm in my scuba gear today, and that is because if I wear my wetsuit, I need a place to put all of the fun gear that allows me to talk to you guys and listen to the directors. And I was looking and thinking I could put it in a weight belt, but I figured my BCD, which was a buoyancy control device, would be the perfect thing to use because it's got lots of little weird pockets. And let's see. So what I can show you here, we'll start at the top of the page. There's the sea urchin. So that's what the sea urchin shell looks like. And you can see the name is the echinoderms. And I really do think they get a bad rep because they only really have their spikes to protect themselves. But these little Cape urchins that you would actually see in our region.
My name is Solomon Lobu. I am working at Singita Kruger National Park. I am very excited today to be one of the guys that have been nominated or selected to participate in the Safari Guide of the Year. I'm an activator. I like studying something, motivating others to become better. I am positive. I like to focus on the positive sides of the situation.
Here at WildEarth, we promised great monthly prizes for our explorers, and this month is no exception. If you join our club before the 10th of July, then you stand a chance to win a fabulous Safari Guide online course brought to you by Bushwise Field Guides. They specialize in accredited safari guide training with courses tailored for the African safari lodge industry. Sign up to be a WildEarth explorer today and don't miss out on this life-changing opportunity.
So I'm very grateful that I have Flippy, because I'm sure you've all noticed that I have the mind of a sieve. And I completely forgot that the other thing we wanted to start the show off was to actually show you guys this foam. So this is the sea foam. That's a combination of proteins and fats and bits of kelp. And this washes up as a result of strong seas that churns up the ocean and causes sea foam. And things like seals don't eat the foam, but this foam is so great for all the little snails that live in these channels, because they get little nutrients from the foam. So as the foam sort of coats the channels, the sea snails will then head down into the channel and they'll start to feed on the foam, which I find really awesome. So larger animals wouldn't get enough nutrients from it. But this is like Christmas Day whenever the foam comes in for the little snails, the gastropods, like your little limpets, your winkles, your turban shells. And the foam has a very distinctive smell. Once again, very difficult to describe, but it's got a cold smell to it. And you can see it looks like pollution, so it looks like something that is quite gross and quite icky, but you're welcome to touch it. You can play in it. Justine, that's a really interesting question. So you're asking if animals will use foam to lay their eggs in the ocean. I can't think of one. Can you think of anything, Flippy? So I know that there's frogs. Is it foam nest frogs? Is that what they're called? There's frogs in Kruger that use foam to lay their eggs, but I think foam sits on the surface in the ocean. You can't really have foam forming below the surface, and so I don't think that any sea creatures would be using that to lay their eggs, because this foam also dissipates really fast in the sun. And our brilliant director, Sikle, is letting me know that there is the foam nest frogs. And it comes back to me saying that there's so much information that your brain has in bits and bobs. And this show really makes my brain dig for those little bobs, and I have to go and check if I'm right so often. But luckily, you guys do point out when I am saying the right things and when I'm sort of on the right vein. So I wanted to show you the foam because that was really cool. And the next thing I wanted to do is answer Grace's unanswered question from yesterday, because Grace was asking about oysters, and you were asking about pearls and how pearls form. And the way the pearls form is that something gets into an oyster, but not only an oyster, any sort of mollusk shell. So it could be an abalone shell, it could even be the snail shells. And what happens is that it's either a little parasite or grain of sand, a bit of leftover food that gets stuck inside the shell, and then it's perceived as a threat or an irritant. And so what happens is that the shell will actually, or the animal will release mother of pearl. And I've got some mother of pearl to show you. So it'll release this beautiful sort of iridescent material and cover the grain or cover the irritant. And that is how pearls form. So this is mother of pearl from an abalone shell. I don't know if we'll be able to capture the iridescence for you. And then I also said on the show that we don't really get oysters here. And then I got a big fright because I looked in the book, and apparently there are a couple of oyster species that could be found in the Cape. But then on Facebook there's this amazing group called Underwater Cape Town, and it's for divers, and there's marine biologists on there. And I went and researched it, and it's believed that there might be some oysters in this region, but they are so rare that scientists haven't really documented them. So oysters are a lot more common along the east coast, and Neisen is very famous for oysters and the oyster festival. But here, if we do have oysters, they're often so well hidden and covered in algae and things that you don't actually see them. And so it's likely that they might occur, but I believe in very low densities. And if marine biologists who are out there every day are not finding them, then I think it must be quite a tough find. But Gracie, I hope that answers your question, and I hope that you are watching today, and that I was able to get that for you. The big We're going to put that down and we're going to see what else the seashore has for us. It's going to be too windy for us to go to mermaid pools. We're going to get really smashed by the sea spray. And that's the only place that I can think where I can show you an urchin. So we'll have to do urchins on another day. Flippy, where would you like to go? Okay. I'm going to let Flippy lead the charge. I think what we might do is we might walk along the seashore for a little bit. And I will walk behind Flippy. And we'll see what else we can find, and we might start to make our way towards the left wing and maybe end off our show with some penguins. So the best time to come down to the intertidal zone will be, oh, there's a very beautiful sandy urchin. Sandy anemone that we have, who's managed to get some seaweed stuck inside its mouth. So I think they prefer to eat protein. And I'm pretty sure they can also expel things if they want to. So this is a sandy anemone, and they come in several very beautiful colors. They will often cover themselves in sand so that you can't recognize them. That's a really cool find. And then, Flippy, are you looking at the limpets or are you looking at the turban shells? You see?
We protect and reconnect nature across southern Africa. We bring countries together to care for wild spaces that stretch beyond borders. We protect and restore biodiversity. We prioritize the people living in these landscapes, enabling them to thrive in harmony with nature. We are restoring tomorrow.
Doing a little bit of a walk. Jay, not only do they look alien-like, I think they are very much like aliens. If I look at the sea creatures that we have here, with the anemones being able to change sex and separate themselves to reproduce, it's really quite wild what these animals can do. So I think what I might do is I might just settle us for a little bit and see if there's anything we can find in this region here. Ah, we have an urchin, yay! Okay, so I've got a Cape urchin for you. We're going to see if the water will allow us to film him, because it is quite... it's quite ripply. So we'll just see if Flippy can get it. Flippy, do you want shadow on him? Okay. So there we have an urchin who's living inside one of these tidal pools. And urchins are made up of 5 equal sides. And that's, I guess, another difference with an anemone, is that anemones have symmetry, but they're not necessarily made up of 5 or 8 equal sides. And so the urchins will live in these pools. I believe they're a little bit more active active at night. And so they look like they're stationary, but they actually move around quite a lot, especially if something like a starfish were to try to chase them. You'll see often you'll have anemones and urchins in different pools. So animals do like to settle themselves where they feel they can find the most food. And that urchin is actually on a piece of kelp at the moment, so I can just see the kelp below him. So he's got something to eat there if he'd like. So I'm actually quite glad that we got to show him to you. So Cape urchins are not the most venomous of urchins. If they do get stuck in your fingers or in parts of your arm, like I've had, they will stay for quite some time, and it is actually good to try and get the spines out. The urchins are not going to use those spines to capture food, where the anemones are going to use their stinging cells to be able to capture and immobilize their food. So we're just going to show you what the sea looks like, and then I think we're going to keep moving. Oh, and Flippy's found a very red anemone that we might have a look at. Get to the other side of him there. So when anemones are this bright colour, we had a question yesterday about if they were bright colours on purpose, and generally the brighter the colour, the more poisonous the animal might be. And so when you see brightly coloured animals on the seashore, it is best not to touch them. There are some anemones that people will touch.
We know that there's nothing worse than just as your favorite leopard is about to catch his first meal in 3 days, you are on the edge of your seat and up pops an advert. But as you know, a life without advertising would mean a very boring evening when you arrive home from work. Because WildEarth and most other media companies rely on advertising in order to fund our content. But we want to let you know that we hear you, and to show you how much we care about your experience in nature. You can watch WildEarth without the ads. Sign up to be an explorer and watch the channel on the WildEarth website completely ad-free. Head over to our Explorer page to find out more. WildEarth Explorers, it's in your nature.
We're going to have a fairly long walk now, so if you have any questions that you'd like to ask that we haven't answered yet, you can ask them as we walk. Leslie, the wind is making it a little bit tricky to hear you, but I think that you're asking if there are any crabs that can survive in fresh and salt water, and I believe so. I believe that the crabs that live in estuarine situations are being exposed to crabs, or being exposed to water rather, not other crabs, but water that is sometimes very fresh and sometimes very salty, depending on whether it's coming in from the sea as the tide pushes in, or from the freshwater resources that are coming down to the ocean. And so animals that live in estuaries are adapted to survive those big changes. And I mentioned that I grew up going to Trafalgar off the south coast of KZN, and there you have a lot of estuaries, and you'd have a lot of crabs who live in the estuaries. And so we would always try to find them. There's a very famous place called the Waffle House. They've got an estuary there, and you've got all of these crabs living in the mud. But they would certainly be exposed to the salt water as the high tides came in. Hannah, so that's really interesting. How crabs find mating partners. I would say it would have to be the right place at the right time. I think that there are some that actually aggregate. But what I'll do is I'll get back to you on that tomorrow, because I think that's very particular when it comes to the type of crab. And we are almost in the left wing, so we can spend our last bit of time with some penguins. That's a really good question. I don't know why I have it in my head now that there's I think there are some crabs that have some sort of mass spawning too, to my knowledge. But I'll have to go do some reading about that. And I hope that you're enjoying learning about the rocky shores with me.
The Safari Guide of the Year 2022 is approaching us rapidly. This year, we'll be heading to Bushwise Field Guides at the Southern African Wildlife College from the 27th June till the 2nd of July. We will soon meet all our contestants who are vying for the prize of being the very best of the best, and the judges who will put them through their paces. Join me, Steve Falconbridge, as we dream it, guide it, win it.
If you would like to be a part of the team that shares the wildebeest migration in Kenya live on WildEarth, then we have some great news for you. There are a few places left to join our expeditions in August and September this year. You'll be staying in an exclusive tented camp with ensuite bedrooms nestled in the riverine woodlands of the Talek River. Head over to our website to book your bucket list experience today. WildEarth Expeditions. Travel with purpose.
We might just settle down in the left wing for the last little bit of today's show. We've only got 10 minutes left, but I hope that you're enjoying learning the rocky shores with me, because there is so much to learn, and there's still so much that we are discovering about the lives of the animals in the intertidal zone and in the ocean. With a lot of the animals, if you look at the books, they've got identification features. Most of the sea creatures, you can't find much else because they're so hard to study. Unfortunately, it is super windy. We've just moved out of the rocky shore zones. So I just want to see if I stand with my back to the wind, if that might be helpful. So the wind is supposed to be over 20 knots today. So we'll just see. That sounds a little bit better. What I'm actually going to do, you're going to laugh at me now, but Flippy can show you. I'm going to sit, because we have a wall of June spinach, and so I can kind of peep over it But I'm going to sit here, and then this is going to protect me from the wind so that you're not having that in your ears. So the June spinach is not only helpful to penguins, but also to us here at WildEarth. So very thankful for this little wall that we have. And it's actually amazing just sitting here now how much sound I've lost. I wouldn't think that the June spinach would be so thick and so brilliant at blocking noise. It's very interesting. Riley, I think that we don't have too much longer with the crazy eights. I think that we're not going to have them for very much longer here. I'd say another month or so, and these little ducklings are going to be heading off and finding their own way. So they are supposed to fledge. I've got a peek over the wall now. You might get a bit of noise coming in. Oh, the mother duck has just noticed me peeking over. These ducklings are almost ready to fledge, and so I think in the next month we're going to see them leaving Mark and Cleo and heading off to find their own homes.
Hello everyone from sunny Namibia. My name is Cameron Pierce, and this year I'll be representing Ongava Game Reserve at the Safari Guide of the Year 2022 edition. You know, a lot of people have asked me what it would be like to win the competition, and it would obviously be an incredible privilege, but even just to be selected as one of the 5 finalists is an honor that I never expected, and special to be a part of it for this year.
My name is Liam Henderson. I'm a guide at the Homestead Lodge on Nambiti Private Game Reserve in KwaZulu-Natal. I think Safari Guide of the Year is a great competition to be a part of. I'm somewhat nervous for the tracking part of the competition, as being in KZN now, haven't been exposed to the low-felt animals and tracks and signs that are so apparent out there.
So we're soon going to be sending you over to our safari team over in Djuma. And James is going to be taking over Liam's leopard sighting from this morning, so he's really hoping to meet Tolamba's babies. Liam wants to go to the dams. He says he's missed the dams too much, so he wants to go and see what's happening at Chitwa Dam. And we've just gone from all girls to all boys. Chris is going to be heading around the koppies, so the little rocky interfaces, to scratch around and see what he can find. And I want to spend our last couple of moments, because I did wear this today, I feel like we need to do something on it. You can see I'm covered in sand. But today, to make sure that I could keep my equipment on me, I wore my scuba diving BCD, which is a buoyancy control device. And I just thought I'd show you a couple of things about it, because when we're in the intertidal zone, we're talking so much about these underwater animals, and I really do hope that one day you will try scuba diving. And so animals control their buoyancy using lots of different things. So fish have swim bladders, and sharks actually use their livers. But when humans go under the water, we wear a cool little jacket like this. And this jacket allows you to actually control how floaty or not floaty you are. And so usually you've got a tank on your back, and you press this cool little button over here, and you're able to actually inflate this jacket, which makes you float, or you press this button at the top where you deflate the jacket, and that helps you sink. So that's pretty much the concept of scuba, is you're trying to be neutral in the water. So you're trying to not float, you're trying to not sink, you're trying to stay like this, and then you kick around and have a look around. And I just want to show you what you can do, because I don't have a tank on my back, but I'm just going to inflate the jacket for you quickly, so you can see how that would work essentially. So there's a manual inflating system where if I press this button down and blow in here, then I'm able to actually inflate my jacket. So I'm going to look a bit like a pufferfish. So you can see my jacket is now fully inflated, and I can let some air out there and let some air out there. So if you've been wondering about scuba diving and a bit nervous to try it and a bit nervous to see what it's about, I highly recommend doing it. It's really changed my life. You'll also see that I'm in a full wetsuit today, which I would never have been 5 years ago. So I think often people think I've got to look a certain way or be a certain sort of fit to be able to scuba dive. You can be in your 80s and scuba dive. You could have any type of body shape and scuba dive. And as long as you're strong enough to carry that tank and jump into the water, I really highly recommend you try it, so you can see all the wonderful animals that we speak about when we are in the intertidal zone. So it sounds like Mark also had a wonderful time on the show with us. I've had a fantastic time with you. I think Flippy has too. So on behalf of Flippy and I, thank you so much for spending your time with us today, for learning about urchins and sea anemones and foam. We love to do this with you. We love to share it. And we're going to spend our last little bit of time just watching our penguins. And I'm going to stay in my little wind-covered patch. I think no better way to end off a Monday afternoon than watching our penguins and our favorite Egyptian geese family braving this very strong easterly wind. So we'll be sending you over to safari in just a moment. Thank you again for watching, and we'll see you again tomorrow.
This program features live coverage of an African safari and may include animal kills and carcasses. Viewer discretion is advised.